Hey, it's 7:30. I know I'm late. Sometimes we have to work late. So that's my reason for joining you later today. This is Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Dr. Lisa Liggins Chambers. I am your host. I am a psychologist. So you are talking to me today on Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. I really do appreciate when people join me. So if you like to get on Podbean and come live and chat with me, you can do that. I am also visible right now and vocal on Instagram at Kids Can See Ghosts. Can you? If you have a question, you can always give me a call at 765-205-1959. And I can also be reached on Gmail, kidscanseeghosts at gmail.com. So I'm all over social media. You can contact me on any of those sites: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all kinds of them. Actually, not all kinds, all of them. So it's been a long day, guys. I am tired, but we are going to do this. So thank you so much for joining me. I am starting, going to finish up blog. I think we're on 21. Parents just don't understand. And then we can, if we have enough time, we can kind of get into blog 22. So last week, we actually discussed a lot about parents, how I categorize parents by their personalities. And these are not just parents that would traditionally come and see me. These are with their children. These are actually the parents of nebulous children. And so I started to categorize them because there were so many different personalities um, around these kids from parents. So remember, I talked about, parents who believed that their kids can see ghosts, parents who did not believe that their kids could see ghosts, parents who believe but not could see ghosts themselves, versus the favorite ones, parents who could see ghosts. So those are the parents, the different categories, and I touched upon them. The last set of parents that we didn't get to finish last week are the parents who could see ghosts themselves, just like their children. So those parents were probably the most interesting because they were actually the more difficult parents to work with. And it's not that they're difficult people, but they were also, difficult to work with because I think I told you last week, one of the things that they kept doing to me was to always telling me what was around me. And so if you really think about that from my perspective, that can get just a little bit nerve wracking if somebody's constantly around you and you're trying to help their kids, but they're like, wait, let me tell you about whatever angel is around me at the time. Or things like, okay, last night an angel visited you and your husband to protect you overnight. It's kind of like, I got to hear this every single week from these parents about different things that were around me or around my family. And it had gotten to a point where it was happening so much from these parents because they get comfortable real fast. And when you think about it, sometimes they don't have a lot of people to talk to about this. So if they find one person or they found me and I was willing to listen because I believed, in their abilities, then of course, they're, after I'm finished working with their children, they're going to want to talk to me about it. And I listened. Over time, I had to put up some more boundaries with these parents to try to get them to not tell me so much, because it wasn't just about me, it was in the buildings. No matter, remember I said it was in different states and at different mental health centers in the same state. For example, in St. Louis, different mental health agencies. So this happened quite a bit when I would see these type of children. So they would tell me different things that were going on in the buildings. They were telling me different things that were going on outside of the buildings, down the hallways, in the parking lots. So It was a lot. Now, I thought it was pretty cool, that the parents had this ability too, but it was a lot. It was a lot. Sometimes it was a lot. I'll give you an example. They would do what I call ghost brain dump. I know that sounds kind of funny, but that's exactly what it was. It was ghost brain dump. It was, sitting with me, especially when on one of my jobs I talk about the four different buildings and building two, especially when we moved to building two. In building two, the nebulous parents that I would see would tell me everything. Let me give you an example. And I think I told this story about um, the movie The Exorcist to all of you and how it relates to this building. So, the reason that I found out about building two being the building where the little boy, remember it was a girl in the movie, it was actually a little boy from the East Coast who moved to St. Louis. And so the way that I found out, not just about the little ghost boy, but that the psychiatrist's office and the psychologist's office or something like that, the room where I was seeing the kids was the psychologist's office, and I think the psychiatrist's office was next door, something like that, the room next door, so across from mine. And so the reason that I knew that is because, the parents told me, and then I actually confirmed a couple of things with my coworkers, and I'll be damned, it was true, right? Not something that you ask, and if you read my blogs over Halloween, you now know that I don't watch the movie The Exorcist. So this is not a movie where I'll go to a job and say, "Hey, do you have some, A, just some ghosts in the building, but B, is it in relation to The Exorcist?" That would be silly for me to ask, right? So that's not something I did. So I wouldn't know any of this stuff without the parents telling me. And so I'm no dummy. I just don't sit there and believe what people tell me. So I actually go and research it. And when I researched it, of course, I started with my coworkers, and you better believe they knew all this already. Okay. Remember, I told you they also knew about the ghost in building 3 or the demon that was in building 3. They knew all about him. And that came from the parents that I worked with. So it's not like I got the job and said, "Hey guys, what's happening in building 2?" Although it was creepy to me because it was really dark. Anything really, really dark to me is going to be creepy. It's not like I went in there and said, "Your building's dark and creepy. It must be haunted. Please tell me you have a sighting in here or there's some paranormal activity." That is not what I did. I didn't actually start questioning what these parents were telling me about this building in particular until it just happened a lot. It happened a lot. And I started with my boss, and then I was like, "Okay, can you guys confirm this?" They keep telling me this, And so when the coworkers were like, "Oh yeah, we know he's here," then it's kind of like, oh my God, what these parents are telling me is true. It's absolutely true. Then I would go to like different archives, libraries, and stuff like that and look this stuff up, old records and things like that. And so this stuff was confirmed to me. And it was all because the nebulous parents or the parents who could see ghosts were telling me this stuff, and their kids would confirm it as well. So that's just an example of how they would dump on me. And even if it's true, imagine being their psychologist or their therapist or, their social worker, their speech language pathologist. After a while, it's going to be a lot. So I called it brain dump or ghost brain dump. And it happened every single time I work with nebulous parents. They would always start with the angel that's behind me. They will always talk to the angel in the tree. That is just a jovial angel who would talk to all the kids and all the parents and tell them different things about me, little funny things. Nothing, interpersonal or inappropriate. The kids would always tell me, what is that angel talking about? And I would kind of look like, okay, that angel is protecting me because it won't tell the kids what happened between, my husband and I, for example, when we were out of the country. So they don't tell the kids things that they shouldn't, but it's just kind of like alarming because it's like, well, dang, the angel saw me do that. So you see these parents and the kids would tag team one another and tell me things, you know. So it became overwhelming um, at times until I learned how to put boundaries up and get them to stop doing that. You know, it was just getting to be too much. But these parents, I often refer to them as wonderful historians because sometimes parents will have a gap in between what they can tell you historically about their kids, right? Especially if they've had children with significant challenges. And so these parents would tell me everything, including what ghosts their kids see because they can see them and how that ghost is interacting with their kids and whether it's dark, you know, whether it's of God and how it actually would disrupt their child's lives and how long it's been going on and what they see with their kids and how they're at a loss for what to do in order to help their children. So I felt like these were actually the more difficult parents, you know. They sometimes would say things like, well, you can't see ghosts, so how are you going to help your kids? And my response would be, does a doctor have to have a broken arm in order to help you? Hello? If you broke your arm? No, they don't. So I can help your kid, but to a certain degree because I don't see ghosts either. And seeing a ghost is not the issue, it's the way the kids are reacting to it and the symptoms of mental health that are happening because your kids are afraid or they are having a significant time with dealing with their ability. And so you're starting to see symptoms of depression. So that's where I come into play. I just have experience dealing with these type of children, you know. So a lot of times they were more difficult to work with when you would think that they would be easier. But if they were going to be easier because they could see ghosts, then they could deal with it themselves, right? Because they were used to seeing ghosts all of their lives, like their kids. But they would typically need a lot of structure from me in order to work with them. So I would have to structure them to a point where they needed to focus on their kids and not me, or focus on their kids and not giving me information that's happening like in the building, or ooh, I see Casper over there. You know what I mean? Casper the friendly ghost. So sometimes I make light of this stuff because it gets, you know, hard to talk about every now and then, you know. And then they would have a hard time focusing because they sometimes didn't have a lot of people to talk about this stuff with. And when they did, when they were younger, people would call them names. People wouldn't believe them. People would say things like they were the crazy word, CARZY, you know, a word that I don't like to use to describe mental health. But these are the different things that, you know, the parents would say to me. And so they would need somebody to talk to. So I was that ear for them, although I was actually working with the kids. So that's why it became hard. The other thing is the parents knew that I was not trained in working with the supernatural. I'm not sure who gets trained to do that actually. Maybe paranormal psychologists have more, you know, experience with that in individuals, but I didn't. But, you know, these parents knew that, so they frequently wanted to teach me how to be more familiar, you know, with this stuff. And so I just would learn from the parents, you know, what it looked like, how to deal with it, you know, different signs. So they were actually really good educators for me. Child B, I talk about Child B's mother quite a bit. And so Child B's mother was an extremely good teacher for, you know, paranormal activity because Child B's mother would take me through what it was like to see ghosts for herself, right? and was great with visualizing or helping me to visualize what this life is like. So, one of the things that she would tell me all the time is that it's disturbing. It's disturbing. It's not always fun. When it's positive and peaceful, is typically when God's angels are around, or she calls upon God to protect her and her child. Because remember, her child was interacting, with demons, and she could see this. And so she would get a kick out of talking to, like, she would walk into my office sometimes and go, whoa, like, if you can see my face, like, okay, you've been praying. And I'm like, yeah, I've been praying. Your kid keeps talking about seeing, different demons around the building. And she's like, well, God's angels are all in here and they're smiling at you. And I'd be blown away, completely blown away. And she would say, stuff like, well, it's very safe in your office to me and to my kid, which is why my kid runs up the stairs to your office. And I'm getting really concerned about my child's mental health because my child keeps interacting with dark angels. Remember, kids call demons dark angels. They don't quite describe them as demons like adults do. So over time, I stopped viewing parents that can see ghosts too as such a barrier to mental health treatment because they focused a lot on what was around in the supernatural world, things that I can't see. And I realized I actually needed them more. So I had to learn to embrace these parents, but I had to also teach them how to interact with people who don't always want to know what's around them because I didn't always want to know. Some of this stuff could get scary. Like, I'll tell you a time that we were standing outside in the parking lot and we were kind of in between buildings 2 and 3. And this was in St. Louis. And her husband was actually there, Child B's father. And it's an experience I'll never forget because they both turned around and they were like, ooh, looking at building 2. And I'm kind of like, what? And they said, we can hear this demon saying how much it hates you, me. And I'm like, okay. Then there was a time I worked with a child that I've already talked about, and I have to look back to figure out which letter. I feel like it's, see, I feel like it's child C or D, but I would have to look back at my blogs. One time we were looking out at a window, and I didn't put this in my blog yet. And this kid was like, do you see what's happening in that house over there to the left? This was in the city of St. Louis. And I said, no. I said, don't forget, I don't see ghosts. We took a break in our psychological testing, and she was telling me about this. She said, there's a demon over there. And I was like, really? What does it look like? And she said, they don't look like people think they do. They have wings. They're like dark angels. Some of them. They're dark angels. And I said, oh, that's why the kids say dark angels, because they have wings. Just like in the show Lucifer, when Amenadon, I think that's the character who was supposed to be Lucifer's brother, had the black wings that went out. That's how the kids describe dark angels. They have wings, just dark wings, black. And so she said, it's over there. And she said, it's talking about how much it didn't like you. Well, how many times did I want to hear how much demons didn't like me? But this time was different because I asked her why. I said, why does this demon not like me? And she said, she looked and she got quiet. She was looking across the street at the house. It was an abandoned house. And she said, and she looked at me and she said, because it said you pray and you like God's angels. I kid you not. And I said, huh, I'll never forget that. So these are the things that started to happen to me when I started working with these kids and these parents. So this is the stuff that I would hear all the time. And how many times can you hear, that things you can't see don't like you? So it used to mess with me because sometimes I would drive and go, okay, what's around me that doesn't like me? Am I going to get in a car accident? What's going to happen? So, that's why over time I had to put some boundaries in place and some barriers because they were telling me too much and it was getting in my head, and I had to start praying about all of this stuff so that I can be stronger when I work with these kids and these parents. And so in return, what I had started to do was to teach them more about mental health. So sometimes it would go like I would have a whiteboard, not a chalkboard. Us old folks know about the chalkboards. You young folks deal with these whiteboards. And so I am a visual person. So I would actually write out the differences with them to teach them, for example, how to distinguish between symptoms of mental health in their kids versus their ability to see ghosts and when the two collide. And I wrote a blog about that. So ultimately, when we collaborated, what we saw together was a decrease in symptoms of mental health. And I was like, God dog it, instantly when I work with these particular parents, there's something to mental health and its ability and how they connect. And I don't think anybody's researched to find out the connection. But when you deal with this for so long, well, when I dealt with it so long, I'll speak for myself, I started to separate the two, mental health versus the ability to see ghosts, and be able to work with both. It was a hell of a skill to try to work with both challenges in one child. But over the years, I learned how to do it, how to separate it. And so with these parents, even though I still feel as if they were probably more difficult, we learned to collaborate well. Okay. And so I called this Parents Just Don't Understand because it just felt like dealing with so many different parental personalities, they just didn't get it. So it was up to me to get them to the point where they did. So that concludes blog 21. So a lot of you asked so many questions, and I am here for it. I love it. So what I did with the next blog is I started to write out questions that you've had about me and curious things. So it's funny because somebody asked me a question on here that I'm looking at just yesterday. And the common question that people always ask me, I'm going to tell you guys until I'm blue in the face. The question is, can you see ghosts? No. No. But it does not mean that I cannot work with children who can see ghosts. I do have some family members who can see ghosts, and I can't reveal who they are, obviously. So I actually have been around this kind of ability probably all my life. I just didn't know one day I'd be working, with kids that can see ghosts. Actually, somebody asked me yesterday, did all of the kids that you work with, could they see ghosts? No. The majority of the children that I work with could not see ghosts, okay? That's why this was so interesting, because the few children that I worked with, so you guys got to think back now. I've been working with kids since 1990. So what is that, 31 years? So I've had a master's degree since 1998. Now that's what, 23 years? So for 23 years, I've been seeing kids, and I still see kids. So I've worked with a ton of kids and their parents over the years, the span of 30 years, right? But so I don't have a number for how many kids I've actually worked with, but if you think about a span of 30 years, and I've only worked with children with the exception of 1 year, I worked with adults and they were college kids. I've always worked with kids. And so at random when we would pull kids off of a waiting list, because that's what you usually do for community mental health. At random, these kids would come to me. So this is not word of mouth. Only one of the kids out of all of them followed me from place to place, and I didn't even know they were looking for me. Okay. So these are all random kids. To this day, I've had word of mouth, a lot of word of mouth to come and see me, but I have not had word of mouth, oh, you could talk to her about the fact that you see ghosts. I wish I had that. And I wish more kids who could do this come to me. And the reason I wish that is because they really need help. They really need help in understanding their gifts, because it is a gift, but some of them take it to a dark place, and that's what I don't like, and that's what causes their mental health concerns. How did I know the children were truthful? Easy, very easily. In the beginning, like I said, I was probably too shocked. Remember child A, my reaction to child A in the earlier blogs? When child A, if you haven't read it, you should read it, because it was really an initial experience of mine with these kind of kids. When that spider moved up on its own, I said I was shocked. Every single time I meet one of these kids, I'm still shocked. But because I have baseline knowledge of this stuff, so for example, I know there's an angel in the tree. Every last kid, every last nebulous kid I worked with had a conversation with the angel in the tree that I talk about. Okay. When a new kid comes along, so let's say I get one tomorrow and they start giving me those vibes. I actually just had one that gave me these vibes of being able to see ghosts. Until they tell me, I don't ask. Until their parents tell me, I don't ask. That is not a question you ask in mental health. Do you see ghosts? We might say, are you able to see things around you? And if they say yes, and ask them how long, but that depends on the referral, why they're coming to see you. Typically, I don't ask kids that because I don't have to. And so when they start talking about the things, I use myself. So when they start talking about the things that are around me that I know other kids have talked about, typically I know when they're telling the truth. Okay. And so the other thing I would do is I always research. I've researched a lot of things that kids would tell me. Like I found out one kid told me about some land and how this kid was seeing ghosts on, I haven't even written about this, ghosts on a piece of land. And one parent told me the land used to be something. I'm going to write about it, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. Well, I researched the land. I was like, oh, come on now. Is this really true? And I researched the land, and it was absolutely true. So I don't just take everything at face value. I do my homework on it too. And always remember that everything is confidential, or it should be, even in the schools. Confidential. And so when families share these things with me, it's all confidential. So I don't go back and tell another family. So family A talks about seeing ghosts. I don't go tell family B who revealed the same thing to me. Oh, the family that was just here, they said they can see ghosts too. You can't do that kind of stuff. And so I didn't do it. So I wasn't able to tell each family what I was told from another family. But when these stories matched over and over and over again, at some point you start believing what you hear, because it was in different cities, different states, and different jobs. Same thing, always starting with the angels around me. Then somebody asked, were you ever afraid of these families? I was not afraid of the families. I was never afraid of the families. No, I'm never afraid of families. There are some stories that are scary, right? You know some of them. The twin flames. Those kids were scary. Not the kids themselves, but their stories were scary. I remember child A talked to me about how when I first met child A at one mental health center and we finished working together, and then I went to a whole different mental health center, and child A had told, I was thinking about it, that's why I was quiet. Child A had told me when I first worked with him, when we walked from the waiting room to my office, I could still see it. At the second job where child A's parents found me, that child told me what I didn't know when I walked to the office when we first met, that there were things moving behind me. Like toys were moving and like following us. And he was saying that, some of the ghosts that were in the room actually did that. Yeah. The only other time that I had some serious, serious pause was when I mentioned I walked into the waiting room and all the toys went off by themselves. And I was the only one in the building on that floor that day. That was a little unnerving. But otherwise, I have not been afraid. And the families were always very nice to me. Very nice to me, very respectful, no aggression. Yeah. So to answer your question, was I ever afraid of the families? No. Some of their situations, heck yeah. Heck yeah. But some of them got pretty scary. Um, was I ever afraid of, am I afraid of ghosts now? Would I go to haunted houses and stuff like that? I'll answer the haunted house question in a minute. Am I afraid of ghosts now? Nope. Not at all. Mm-mm. No. People ask me that a lot. Can the stories get to you? Sure they can. I told you. You know what? I'll tell you something that happened to me today. I was driving on the highway, and as I was merging onto, I'm on I'm losing my train of thought, the entrance ramp, and there was a semi truck. If you can see my hands, my right hand is me. I'm waving my right hand. I'm merging onto the highway. There's a semi truck. And I don't know why they do this when you merge on the highway. Look, if people are merging on the highway and you see it ahead of time and you can get over, get out of the way. Get out of the way. The truck would not move over in the left lane. So here I am. There's nothing I can do. The highway is running out. The semi truck's tire blows this morning, and it's just hanging. And I'm thinking to myself, crap. My mother is listening, so I have to censor my mouth. So I said, shoot, what do you do now? If you slow down, the car behind you is going too fast. If you try to get over, well, you're going to fall off the highway. You can't go left because the semi is swerving because the tire blew. And at that moment, I thought to myself, I hope my angel is on the car like the kids told me. You see, it does. I still recall a lot of the stuff that the kids told me. Like at that moment, I was like, I hope you're still on the hood of my truck because I don't want to get in an accident this morning. Right. So I'm not afraid at all. Like I can walk in the dark and not be afraid, but I still have some of that stuff, in my head. And if you have questions, make sure you ask me. I typically will answer them while we're live on air. Um, Another question that, oh, yeah, somebody asked me this. Okay. Do other psychologists ever accuse you of lying about children's ability to see ghosts? No. And I'll tell you why. For one thing, a lot of psychologists talk about people that can see ghosts. We know that there's something to this. A lot of people are skeptics. We hear about this often. A lot of psychologists aren't talking about it. This is the stuff that I've been talking about to my friends in the field, outside of the field, and other coworkers for a really long time. So these stories are new to all of you, but they're not new. Like some of my friends listen and they go, "Oh, I remember you talking about the little person who um, was talking to the demon outside of the window at our job." Some of my former coworkers listen and they go, "Yeah, I remember that story." One thing that I would do, a lot of times psychologists will have consultations with other psychologists, or we will often get together in a group and do different cases, present them so that other psychologists can help. And sometimes students, interns, and stuff will join us. And so some of them I'm still in contact with. And they're like, "We're glad you're finally telling these stories. You've been holding them for years." It's about time for you to start talking about this stuff. And a lot of these individuals are still very encouraging and supportive of this. And I've only had one professional in all these years, the social worker I talked about, who was negative. Just one. That's amazing to me. But these stories are absolutely true. And they did happen. And that's why I can talk about them without looking at any notes or looking at the evaluations, because I remember a lot of them because they were so profound and memorable. So it took a lot of courage for me to start talking about this stuff publicly. Um, a lot of professionals have other professionals and friends and family. Um, my hometown folks. I mean, a lot of people who pushed me to do this. And I always promised these children that I would talk about their stories one day, because these are not my stories, these are their stories. I'm just talking to you all about how I interacted with them. I have the number 6 is a question that I waited on for quite a long time. And finally, someone asked me, if I could prove all of this, could I do it? Or could you? Could you prove it? And so I've been waiting on this kind of question. And what I will say is, do I have empirical evidence of it? No. These kids weren't research studies of mine. I didn't take any data that I can share with the public. Somebody said there's always one. You got that right. Um, there's always one skeptic, but I don't have empirical evidence of this. I just don't. That means that I haven't done a research study. Why would I do a research study on these wonderful little kids and their parents? There are a lot of, I already said this, a lot of psychologists and other professionals who do see individuals or have heard stories, even pastors, especially from people who can see ghosts. They just can't. Will I try to prove it? No, because I don't have a reason to, and I don't even try to persuade all of you to believe it. These are stories that I tell on behalf of children to help other children and other people and to encourage them not to be afraid, to talk about these things, because they really do at times cause psychological problems. Confidential information is off limits. I will never share those. But if I ever need a reminder about what happened in these stories, for example, child B, child D as in dog. I tried to talk about child D in my earlier blogs, and I completely forgot what happened with child D. So at some point, when I have time, I am going to go back, because I remember, that child and that child's face. But until I recall specific details, I don't disclose it. So I skipped over child D, but I'll get to the bottom of that one, in a couple of weeks. But I have no reason to prove it. I'm not trying to make you a believer. I'm not doing it for all of you unless you have the ability to see ghosts and you need, somebody to talk to. But every time I have a parent chime in who talks about, hey, my kid is distressed because my kid can see ghosts and my kid is scared of this, then those are the people that I'm doing it for. Okay? Somebody just commented and said, I'm glad you are sharing your stories. A lot of people have stories they are afraid to share because of judgment. Yep, society is pretty darn judgmental, right? And so, but those are the same people who will be quick to say, what? I can do it too. Or it happened to someone I know. Or it hasn't happened to someone I know, but then once it does, then it's like, I'm on board. I believe it. Children do this stuff all the time. The challenge is, again, when it becomes a challenge with mental health, that's when we have to get involved. Okay. This was a cool question. Have you seen possessed children? Yep. I've seen possessed children. I see a possessed children. Possessed children. I saw a child that I believe is possessed not too long ago. Some of you have probably seen possessed children too. You just don't know it. Sometimes when I see people on who've done heinous crimes and they're on TV, you've seen these kind of people, and they have this poker face, this stoic face, and they're getting ready to go to jail for the rest of their lives for something that they've done, but they have no remorse. Well, what kind of spirit do you think that is? Whether it's a child or an adult. I had a kid not too long ago who picked up a weapon and I looked. And I kid you not, this kid looked straight in my eyes. And I was looking down, like just really deeply. And that's how the kid was looking at me. And I said, stop it. And I held that kid and I prayed with that kid. And there's a change in behavior. It doesn't take people believing in God to help these kids. It doesn't matter if you believe. That's what works. And I'm a witness to it. The next question is, do you believe in God? Yes, I do. Because let me tell you something. I never try to influence people to believe in what I believe in. But when you deal with this stuff long enough, and the things that I've seen, if you guys can get into my head and you had the vision that I have, and all the years that I've worked with this stuff, and how many kids have said to me, how many kids have known that I've prayed before they've come into my office and I didn't tell them, and they could tell me what was in the room and what they saw and what angels look like. It's incredible. There's a hotel in St. Louis, and it is, oh God, I'm losing my memory of the location in St. Louis. It's in the city by the hospitals, off Kings Highway if you live in St. Louis. One of the kids told me that the angel that stands behind me said that I have to stop cutting my hair. And I said, something told you, because I was talking about I was going to cut my hair, just kind of shooting a breeze with the families. And they both got quiet and looked the other way and then laughed and said to me, your angel said, stop cutting your hair. And I said, I didn't write about this either. And I said, stop cutting my hair. It's my hair. Something that I can't even see is telling me not to cut my hair. Anyway, I had an aha moment. I went to lunch at this hotel, and where we were sitting, I looked to my left, and this whole wall had this painting. The whole wall is a large wall. This is a hotel of these angels on the wall. And I just stared at it. The angels were the painting was beautiful. It's probably still there. And it had all the angels had this long flowing hair and wings, and they glowed. And I kid you not, when I saw that child again, it was child B. When I saw child B again and child B's mother, I said, the angel doesn't want me to cut my hair. And they said, no. And I said, is it supposed to be like the angels in the mural in that hotel? And they looked this way, talking, wherever I was sitting. And they said, she said yes. She said yes. So these are the kind of experiences that I've had. So if I did not believe in God before, and I've never ever said on this podcast until today, my beliefs. And then after I work with these kids and learning about dark angels and hearing all these kids talk about demons, yeah, I do believe in God. How did working with these kids affect me emotionally? I was not impacted emotionally. I think I was more puzzled. Like I wrote in the blog, I was more puzzled. Um, it's kind of like you learn something in the books for, you know, let's see, 4 years, then 2.5. So actually 4.5, 2.5. So, first part of my education, 8 years. And then you take a break. I took a break. Then I went back and 5 years, defended a dissertation, and have been to this now. I've been had a doctorate since 2006. And it's kind of like when I think back to learning about kids, I was never taught how to deal with this stuff. So when it happened, I was puzzled. I was puzzled by their ability, trying to figure out if it was reality or not, if it was a delusion or not, if it was a hallucination or not, if these parents and kids were, psychotic, right? And then try to figure out how to help them, because you get trained how to work with, you know, personality disorders. You get trained. My lab was geared toward behavior disorders. So I was trained how to work with, ADHD and conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. I can tell you a whole host of stuff. And I knew how to test for everything because I had started testing kids. So when I got to my doctorate, degree, I learned the harder tests, like the personality test for personality disorder. So nothing in my square box of books dealt with these kind of children and their abilities without labeling them with mental health impairments. So I was not emotionally impacted. I was more puzzled when it became time for me to really figure this out, the studying, the researching, the talking to my colleagues, the pastors, everything that I was doing decreased some of the tension and anxiety that I was feeling, but that's about it. I was not defeated by it, and I wasn't going to be. You know, Consulting with even individuals outside of psychology really helped, and talking to my family. So I think I would keep it together emotionally, but there were times again when it became scary. Am I still a therapist? Nope. I stopped doing therapy a long time ago. I work in the schools now. Of all of your stories, which bothered you the most? That was another question. I would still have to say, I wrote Twin Flames in the blog. I would still have to say Twin Flames was probably the one that bothered me the most. Because if you go back and look at those kids and read, the snapshot of their stories that I told you, I mean, yeah, they were probably the ones that bothered me the most. You said you told these stories to other professionals. Did they believe you? Yes, yes, and yes. I never had, except one person in all these years, discount these experiences. Not one. I'm glad too. That means that everybody believed me. And it was true. All these stories are true. Let's see. Oh yeah, I wrote about this. When I would doubt myself, it was other people who would pick me up and say, hey, there was one social worker one time who told me something very powerful that I would never forget. And she said, who are we to judge these kids? That was when I was at that stage, like, what are we supposed to do with kids that can see ghosts? Is this stuff even true? And she told me that day, she said, well, who are we to judge them? If that's what they tell you, then it's not impossible. Do we have a rationale to discount what they tell you? And I'm like, no. Then she was like, well, then believe them. And that small thing, how it can be one small thing, that small little sentence of not judging them changed me. Changed me. Another question. Have you had a paranormal experience that frightened you? Yes. 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 I talk about one. I just talked about one in October. So just about 2 weeks ago. It was an October ghost story. So I'm not going to tell you that one. You have to read about it. But one that frightened me, I always go back to the toys going off in the waiting room, because I was the only one in the building, and it was quiet, and I was locking up, and I went to that room and hit the door, and bam, all the toys went off. And that's when I told my boss the next day, we need to pray away these entities, because these kids are telling the truth. This place is haunted. And you know what she said? I know, let's pray. So they knew. Another question. Have you seen a ghost, or did you see one while working with these kids? I do not see ghosts, and I'm glad. Like I wrote, I'm glad, because the kids say it's not pleasant and it's not fun and it's scary. I did not see any while I work with these kids, but there were paranormal things that would happen. And so the toy thing is not nearly all of the things that would happen in these 4 buildings. There were a couple of things that happened, and I write about them in future blogs if you are reading them. Let's see. And at home, no, I don't. Somebody asked at home, no, I don't see. Guys, I don't see ghosts. Remember, these are the abilities of the children, not mine. Somebody wrote, amen to God, but should you talk about demons? Somebody else is commenting too. Hold on, I'm going to say your comment in a minute. Should you talk about demons? Yeah. Go ahead and talk about demons. Don't let demons scare you into not talking about them. You need to talk about them. I'm not afraid to talk about them. I don't give them any notoriety or fame, if you will. But yeah, I mean, you should talk about them, because what they don't want you to do is to talk about them. And so that was something that I learned too from the kids and also from different pastors, you know, parents who could see ghosts. They would say, yeah, you call them by their name and call them out. They don't like that. So, you know, the crazy thing about this is that I had to be very comfortable, if you will, talking about these things: God, demons, angels, dark angels. I had to be comfortable talking to everybody, medians. I had to talk to people who believe in you know, all kinds of things. So you can't be afraid if you deal with these kids because they can see beyond what you see. So you have to be strong in whatever faith you believe in so that you can deal with this. And so, you know, yeah, you could talk about them. Why wouldn't I? Because remember, dark angels are what kids call demons. Okay. You're right. Okay. She said, my great aunt was a voodoo priestess. And she told me the ability to see spirits of all kinds is inherited from an elder. And if the elder doesn't have that door closed by someone who has worked with spirits, they will get worse and the outside world won't understand it. And everyone that sees spirits can't see each type of spirit. And I'm going to have to, I'll get back to that first statement, but that second statement, I do absolutely agree, and thank you for chiming in because this is why you have to be careful, and this is why there are so many people who send me messages saying, excuse me, saying things like, you know, how do I call upon demons? Or how do I interact with spirits? I want to interact with spirits. And this person is absolutely correct. It's like, you don't know what kind of spirit you're going to interact with. So don't call them. You tap into a world you know nothing about, and sometimes they don't go away. I hate to quote this person, but that is such a powerful statement, and that came from Marilyn Manson. That happened to him. He says that publicly. He said that on that show, and I talked about this in the October Ghost Story. Celebrity hauntings or celebrity ghost story, he talks about that. So you open up the door to things you can't see. You don't know. This is the thing. This is the thing with, you know, when you start talking to, and I have a tarot card story. You start talking through that from when I was much younger and I didn't know what I was doing. You talk to these different things. You don't know what they are. It's better to leave them alone. Okay. So the ability to see spirits of all kinds is inherited. You know, I don't know if it's DNA, I don't know if it's genetic, but what I do know is that the kids who can see ghosts, the majority of them, their parents could too. So maybe there is something to DNA. I do believe that because we don't always know, those of us who cannot see ghosts, what's walking around us, we shouldn't channel them. And I do believe that we can channel the wrong ones if you are not asking specifically. One of the things that I would ask specifically is for God. Yeah, she said, this person said a soul connection. I would ask specifically if God would send his angels to protect me when I work with these kids and protect my office and to make these kids and families feel safe because I can't see ghosts and I didn't know what they would see. So I didn't know. One time, Child B said, they're all in here with me. And I'm like, who's in here with you, with us? And she said, all of the little spirits that I talked to. And I'm like, how many? Oh, they're in the room, all of them. I said, I grabbed my Bible and said, no, that's not happening today because, honey, I don't know what you're seeing, but did you ask God to send his angels in here? And she's like, no. I'm like, okay, well, pull the Bible out in that moment. I said, if you are not of God, you need to leave. And they all left. Because I asked Child B, what's in the room? She goes, nothing. And I'm like, I need to ask God's angels to come in here. And she said, All of the ghosts that were my friends left. Of course they left, because they're demons. Child A once saw some demons going up the steps in building 2 before we moved into building 2. And child A, I'm sorry, kept saying, "Oh my God, Dr. Lisa, there's more of them. There's more of them." So it kept getting worse. It kept getting worse. And I think this person is correct that the outside world just doesn't always understand. And there were times I didn't understand either. I didn't even, to this day, I don't even understand why the kids all come to me. But I guess that's what I've been ordained to do. This person said it's a soul connection. When I think about that comment, I think about, and I'll leave you guys with this. Some of the kids who will say, these kids have been with you. You know, they've been with you, they know you, they come back to you because they have interacted with you in the past, meaning other lives. And that's not the first time that I've heard that. I don't know if I necessarily believe that I've had other lives. I don't know, but I don't know if I believe it. But saying that there's a soul connection, that's what I call them nebulous children, children that can see ghosts. That's what they told me too. So I'll leave you guys with that. It's getting late. If you have questions or comments, make sure that you let me know. And I truly appreciate all of you listening to me. And again, I apologize, but I had to work. So we were late today. So you guys have a good night, and we'll finish up this blog next week, and then we will start the next one. So I have a lot more stories. You guys have a good night.